It was supposed to be just another day in court. The kind where the judge barely looks up from his paperwork. The prosecutor recites a script he's delivered 100 times, and the defendant stands there looking guilty before a word is even spoken. Nothing unusual. Nothing surprising. That was exactly what Judge Holloway expected when he walked into courtroom 17B that morning. The defendant? Marcus Reed, 18 years old, charged with grand theft auto and resisting arrest. From the moment he stepped into the courtroom, people had already made up their minds. Hoodie, hands in his pockets. Calm, too calm. No lawyer standing next to him, just a public defender who looked more confused than confident. To everyone in the room, Marcus wasn't a question waiting to be answered. He was a verdict waiting to be stamped. Guilty. You could feel the tension buzzing through the air like static. Spectators filled every seat. Some were just there to kill time, others were there to gossip. A few came just to watch another young life slide through the cracks. They didn't expect anything remarkable. They certainly didn't expect him to be remarkable from the bench. Judge Holloway peered down at Marcus with tired, judgmental eyes. He saw a kid, another statistic, another name on a long list of names he wouldn't remember after lunch. Leaning back with a smirk, he didn't even try to hide the sarcasm in his voice. What is this? A high school debate club? Laughter trickled through the courtroom. The bailiff grinned. Even the court reporter cracked a smile. And standing at the prosecution table, Mr. Daniels, sharp suit and sharper tongue, looked ready to deliver yet another effortless win. But the boy in the hoodie didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't bite back, because Marcus knew something they didn't. They didn't know he had been preparing for this his whole life. They didn't know that while his friends played video games, he was studying the Constitution. That while other teens memorized basketball stats, Marcus was memorizing legal precedents and courtroom procedures. They didn't know he was raised by a single mother who worked as a paralegal for 20 years, and that every night, dinner came with a side of court stories. Real, raw, unfiltered. They didn't know that beneath that calm face was a brilliant legal mind with something to prove. And as Judge Holloway flipped open the case file with a sigh and muttered something about a 2 p.m. golf game, he made his first mistake. He underestimated Marcus Reed. What happens next is not just a twist in a courtroom. It's a twist in power, in truth, and in how we see those who are told they don't belong. Because this time, the courtroom wasn't ready for him. The prosecutor's voice echoed confidently across the courtroom, crisp and practiced. The state will prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the defendant Marcus Reed was caught red-handed behind the wheel of a stolen Audi A6. It was the kind of opening that usually signaled a quick and clean conviction. The facts seemed airtight. Fingerprints on the steering wheel, a police chase, and an arrest shortly afterward. On paper, Marcus was guilty. On paper, this case was already over. Judge Holloway nodded lazily, barely glancing up from the folder in front of him. The courtroom seemed to exhale, relaxing into what everyone assumed would be a predictable, boring win for the prosecution. But Marcus Reed wasn't reading from the same script. At the defense table, Lisa Mendoza, the public defender assigned to him, slowly stood. Her eyes flickered nervously toward the judge, then toward Marcus. She hesitated, visibly uncertain. "Your Honor," she began, her voice thin. "My client." She didn't get to finish. Marcus reached out and gently touched her arm. She turned to him, confused. He gave a small nod, then looked up at Judge Holloway, and with a voice that was steady, grounded, and almost unnervingly calm, Marcus said, "Your Honor, I'll be representing myself." The silence hit like a bomb. The room froze. The prosecutor blinked. The bailiff coughed and quickly looked away. Even Judge Holloway, who had seen more defendants than he could remember, leaned forward with a raised eyebrow. "You'll what?" he asked, like he hadn't heard correctly. "I'll be defending myself," Marcus repeated. The courtroom stirred. A few whispers rippled through the crowd. People craned their necks to get a better look at this kid who clearly didn't know what he was doing, or so they thought. Mr. Daniels, the prosecutor, chuckled under his breath and shook his head. "Well, this should be interesting," he muttered. Judge Holloway leaned back in his chair, hands clasped. There was a glint in his eye, a mix of disbelief and twisted amusement. You do understand the seriousness of the charges against you? He asked. I do. You've never attended law school. You're not a licensed attorney. I'm aware. And you're choosing to waive your right to legal representation? Yes, Your Honor. Another beat of silence. Then the judge smirked. Very well. Let's see what you've got. And just like that, the rules of the game changed. Marcus stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't wave his arms. But the air in the room seemed to shift as he moved. Deliberate, focused, razor-sharp. He turned toward the prosecutor's table and asked calmly, Mr. Daniels, you stated that Officer Bradford saw me behind the wheel during the alleged incident, correct? Daniels, arms folded, raised an eyebrow. Yes, that's in the report. And that testimony is central to your case? It's a part of it. Marcus nodded slowly, then turned to the judge. Your Honor, I move to have Officer Bradford's testimony stricken from the record. Holloway blinked. On what grounds? Marcus finally took his hands out of his pockets and placed a printed document on the defense table. Because Officer Bradford wasn't on duty when the chase began. According to public records and the department's own GPS logs, he clocked in nearly 40 minutes after the pursuit was already underway. A stunned hush fell over the room. Daniels stiffened. Marcus continued. So if he claims to have personally seen me in the driver's seat, and yet he wasn't even on the scene, then either the report is false or someone's lying. Now the judge was sitting up straight. Daniels stepped forward, visibly rattled. Your Honor, we object. Objection noted, Holloway said, cutting him off. But I want to see those GPS logs. The audience was no longer whispering. They were silent, watching, transfixed. Something strange was happening in that courtroom. The kid, they mocked, had just landed a blow so precise, so methodical. It left a seasoned prosecutor fumbling for a response. This wasn't just surprising anymore. It was dangerous for the people who thought this would be easy. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't smile. He wasn't there for applause, he was just getting started. The courtroom still hadn't fully recovered. The moment Marcus exposed the falsehood in Officer Bradford's testimony, something intangible shifted. It was no longer just a trial, it was a reckoning. The kind of moment where a room full of certainty begins to second-guess itself. The prosecutor, Mr. Daniels, shuffled his papers a little too loudly. His confidence, once effortless, now wore a hairline crack. Judge Holloway no longer smirked. He was leaning forward, elbows on the bench, eyebrows drawn together. The spectators? No one dared cough, sneeze, or move too much. It felt like something big was coming, and everyone could feel it. Marcus stood calmly at the defense table, his hand resting lightly on a folder that looked worn, well used, like something he'd carried with him for years. Your Honor, he began again, voice smooth but firm. I'd like to address the second major point in the prosecution's argument, the fingerprint evidence. Daniels immediately perked up, hoping to recover ground. The defendant's fingerprints were found on the steering wheel of the stolen vehicle. That's irrefutable physical evidence. We rest our case on, with all due respect, Marcus interjected. The presence of my fingerprints doesn't prove I stole the car. He turned to the jury, scanning their faces, not with arrogance, but with clarity. He didn't speak to them like a lawyer. He spoke to them like a person. Let me paint a picture, he said. Let's say you walk into a department store. You try on a jacket. Slide your hands into the pockets, maybe zip it up. Look at yourself in the mirror. Then you put it back on the rack and leave. He paused. Later that day, someone shoplifts that exact jacket, and your fingerprints are found on it. Does that make you the thief? The room was still. A few jurors looked at one another. A woman in the gallery covered her mouth. I didn't hotwire the car, Marcus continued. I didn't force the lock. The door was unlocked when I passed by. I leaned on it. I opened it. I looked inside for a second, then walked away. He nodded slightly. A dumb decision? Maybe, but not a crime. Curiosity doesn't equal grand theft. Daniels shifted uncomfortably. The fact remains, he said, that your fingerprints were found on the wheel. The car was reported stolen shortly after. Marcus nodded. And yet the person who collected those prints, the forensic specialist, wasn't subpoenaed to testify. Isn't that right, Mr. Daniels? Daniels froze. Judge Holloway turned to him. Is that true? Daniels hesitated. We didn't find it necessary. No expert to testify. No chain of custody explained. No chance for me to question the process, Marcus said, his voice tightening slightly. They want to convict me based on evidence I can't even challenge. He let that hang. Then he walked slowly toward the jury box, the hush in the room growing thicker with every step. I'm asking you to think critically, to question what's being presented as truth. Because when you really start looking at this case, things don't line up. A key officer lied about seeing me. The fingerprints untested in court. And all of this built around one assumption, that I must be guilty. He stopped in front of the jury. But what if I wasn't? There was a rustle from the prosecution's table as Daniels fumbled through his notes. He was reaching, desperate to change the narrative. But Marcus wasn't done. He turned toward the judge. Your Honor, this isn't just about whether I touched a car. It's about the lazy shortcuts being passed off as proof. It's about the system saying, close enough, and calling that justice. Judge Holloway said nothing. Daniels finally stood. Objection, Your Honor. The defendant is trying to turn this into a speech, not a legal defense. But Holloway held up a hand. No, he's pointing out inconsistencies. And frankly, they're valid. Daniels paled. And at that moment, for the first time, it wasn't just Marcus who was being judged. It was the system. The boy in the hoodie had put the courtroom on trial, and he was winning. By now, no one in the courtroom dared to underestimate Marcus Reed. He had gone from being mocked to mesmerizing. From being written off to writing his own narrative. And just when everyone thought they'd seen the full extent of what this kid could do, Marcus dug even deeper. Because there was one more truth he hadn't yet revealed. And when he did, it would change everything. Judge Holloway adjusted his glasses. You may proceed, Mr. Reed. Marcus stepped forward once more, calm and steady. Your Honor, he said, voice unwavering. I would like to enter into evidence a police transcript that the prosecution failed to submit. It's from the initial interview conducted with the registered owner of the vehicle, Mr. Raymond Mercer. Daniels, the prosecutor, visibly tensed. Marcus held up a printed page and walked it to the clerk, then turned back to the courtroom. This is a direct quote from Mr. Mercer, the man who reported the Audi stolen that night. He took a breath and read aloud. I left my car running outside the gas station. I ran inside for a few minutes. When I came back out, someone had driven off with it. I saw the kid who took it. He was white, definitely white. Young, maybe 16 or 17. It all happened so fast. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. One juror covered her mouth. Another leaned forward like they weren't sure they heard right. Daniels closed his eyes briefly. He knew. He had known all along. Marcus let the moment hang there. Then he spoke, softer now, but with an edge sharp enough to cut stone. This wasn't just omitted. It was buried. He turned to face the jury directly. The police had this statement the night the car was stolen. The prosecution had it when they prepared this case. But it never showed up in discovery. Why? Because the description of the thief didn't match me. He looked around the courtroom, at the spectators, the stenographer, even the judge. Let me say that again. The man who owned the car said the thief was white. I'm not. The silence in the room was deafening. Instead of continuing the search, they saw me, just blocks away, walking home with friends after grabbing snacks, and they decided, close enough, that was all it took. Wrong place, wrong skin. Daniels tried to interject, desperate now. Objection. This is irrelevant, Your Honor. Overruled, Judge Holloway said immediately. His voice was lower now, more solemn. Marcus didn't stop. They didn't find me in the car. They found the car abandoned. I wasn't behind the wheel. I wasn't running. The only thing they had were my fingerprints, and I've already explained how they got there. He turned to the judge again. And now, Your Honor, the only eyewitness, the only person who actually saw the theft happen, is telling you that I was not the person who stole that vehicle. Then Marcus did something no one expected. He paused. His voice, which had been commanding and confident throughout, suddenly softened, almost cracked. Do you know what it's like to grow up watching your mom come home exhausted from working 2 jobs, believing in the law, teaching you that if you work hard, stay smart, and tell the truth, you'll be okay? He looked down for a second, then back up, eyes a little glassy but unwavering. And then one night you're walking home with snacks, and next thing you know, you're sitting in a courtroom being told you're a thief. And the system, the one you studied, believed in, trusted, turns its back without a second thought. The jury sat frozen. A tear rolled down the cheek of an older woman in the back row. Marcus breathed in, collected himself. I'm not standing here today asking for sympathy. I'm asking for truth. I'm asking for justice. And if this case had been handled with either, I wouldn't be standing here at all. He stepped back, hands at his side. I rest, Your Honor. Judge Holloway didn't speak at first. He simply stared at the boy standing before him. A boy the system had nearly erased with the stroke of a pen. And now that boy had turned the courtroom into a mirror, forcing it to see itself. It wasn't just powerful, it was devastating. And it wasn't over yet. The room wasn't just quiet now, it was holding its breath. Marcus Reed had just shaken the very foundation of the prosecution's argument with the owner's statement. The thief was white, and Marcus clearly wasn't. Still, the courtroom hesitated, teetering between disbelief and awakening. The prosecution had been so sure. The judge had been so dismissive. And now they were all starting to realize this case was never as clear as they thought. But Marcus wasn't done. He stepped back toward the center of the courtroom, standing taller than he ever had, and faced Judge Holloway with the quiet power of someone who knows the truth and is ready to weaponize it. Your Honor, he said, there's one more piece of evidence I'd like to present. The judge blinked. Another one? Marcus nodded and held up a thin file. This is a supplemental report, filed 2 days after the arrest by Officer Jensen, one of the officers who canvassed the area after the vehicle was found abandoned. It includes a statement from a local store clerk who witnessed the aftermath. Daniels, the prosecutor, suddenly stood, clearly rattled. Your Honor, we object to any new evidence. Sit down, counselor, Judge Holloway said, his tone now sharp and tired. Let's hear it. Marcus opened the file, voice steady. The witness stated that a young white male ran from the direction of the gas station toward an alley after the car sped off. Roughly the same time the theft was reported. The witness described him as nervous, sweating, wearing a red hoodie and jeans. Not only does this match the owner's description, but it also conflicts directly with my arrest, which occurred over 4 blocks away. He let that sink in. No effort was made to follow that lead. No sketch was drawn. No follow-up. Why? Marcus looked directly at Daniels now. Because they thought they had me. I was nearby. I was black. That was close enough. Daniels clenched his jaw, but said nothing. Marcus turned again to the judge. This report, along with the owner's statement and the GPS discrepancy with Officer Bradford, paints a very different picture. Not just of me, but of this entire investigation. His voice, though low, cracked with the weight of what he was saying. I didn't just get accused of a crime I didn't commit. I got discarded by a system that didn't even care if it was right. He faced the jury. Look at the pattern. Testimony from a cop who wasn't on duty, fingerprints with no expert validation, a missing eyewitness statement from the vehicle owner, and now a second ignored lead pointing to someone else entirely. This wasn't a case, they built a story. And the only reason that story existed was because of me. How I looked, where I was, who they decided I had to be. He let that silence breathe. And if I didn't know the law, if I didn't spend my whole life preparing for this exact kind of moment, I'd be in a jumpsuit right now. Another innocent kid swept under the rug. Judge Holloway rubbed his temple, visibly shaken. The weight of what had been revealed hung heavy. This wasn't just a failed case. It was a miscarriage of justice caught in real time. The judge turned to the prosecutor. Counselor Daniels, do you have anything further? Daniels, red-faced, shuffled his papers but found no words. No, Your Honor. A long pause. Then Judge Holloway leaned forward. His eyes met Marcus's, And in that look was something unfamiliar, respect, maybe even remorse. He cleared his throat. In light of the evidence presented and the failures of proper legal procedure, this court has no choice but to dismiss all charges against the defendant. It landed like thunder. There was a moment of stunned silence before the gallery erupted. Some in disbelief, others in quiet tears. A mother in the back, Marcus's mother, brought her hands to her mouth, shaking with relief. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just stood there, letting the weight of it all wash over him. This wasn't vindication. It was survival. As he turned to walk out, Judge Holloway spoke again, voice soft but firm. "Mr. Reed," Marcus paused. "You should consider law school." Marcus looked back over his shoulder. No smirk, just calm certainty. "I already have." The words hung in the air like a miracle, and a bomb dropped at the same time. Case dismissed, and in that instant, the entire courtroom seemed to exhale as if no one had remembered to breathe. Silence swept across the room like a tidal wave. Then chaos, gasps, whispers, a burst of stunned murmurs rippling through the gallery. Reporters in the back scrambled for their pens. A man in the front row shook his head in disbelief. The bailiff looked like he wasn't sure whether to smile or keep scowling. And Marcus Reed, the boy once laughed at, doubted, ignored, stood absolutely still. He didn't cheer. He didn't gloat, because this wasn't a victory lap. This was survival. Marcus's mother, seated near the back in quiet agony the entire time, rose slowly to her feet. Her hands trembled over her heart. For a moment, she didn't move. She just stared at her son, tears building but refusing to fall. Finally, as he turned to leave, she rushed down the aisle and met him halfway, pulling him into her arms. "You scared me half to death," she whispered, voice cracking. He exhaled against her shoulder. "I had to, Ma. No one else was going to save me." In the corner of the room, Judge Holloway sat frozen, the gavel still resting in his hand. The look on his face was hard to describe, somewhere between reflection and remorse. His once cocky demeanor had dissolved. Now he looked at Marcus not as a delinquent, but as something else entirely. The mirror they had all tried to avoid. Across the courtroom, Prosecutor Daniel stood motionless, eyes on the floor, every ounce of his earlier confidence stripped away. He had walked into the courtroom expecting a routine win. Instead, he'd been outmaneuvered by an 18-year-old kid who had no formal training. Just truth, clarity, and a fire to be heard, and somehow, that had been enough to burn the entire case down. Marcus began to walk toward the courtroom doors, but before he reached them, Judge Holloway called out softly, "Mr. Reed." Marcus paused, back still to the bench. "You should consider law school," the judge said, voice quiet, almost humbled. Marcus turned his head just enough for the judge to see the look in his eyes, cool, calm, and clear. "I already have." He pushed open the courtroom doors and walked into a storm of reporters. Microphones were shoved in his face. Questions exploded from every direction. "Marcus, how did you prepare your defense? Did you know you'd win? What's next for you?" But Marcus didn't answer. He just pulled up his hood and walked past the noise, toward the courthouse steps, where his mother waited. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. They stood side by side, the noise behind them growing louder, but neither turned back. Across the street, still watching from the courthouse window, Judge Holloway remained in place. But the look on his face had changed. There was no trace of superiority anymore, only reflection. For the first time in years, he had been forced to see the system not from the bench, but from the eyes of the people it crushed. Marcus had done more than defend himself. He had made the system look at itself. And for once, it blinked. This wasn't just about Marcus. It was about every kid who never had the chance to speak up. Every teenager who got labeled before they said a word. Every defendant who sat silently while the system hurried to close another case. Marcus won, but how many others didn't? That's what this story is really about. It's not just a courtroom twist. It's not just a smart kid beating the odds. It's a reminder that truth doesn't always wear a suit. That justice isn't always found in who speaks loudest, but in who refuses to be silenced. Marcus walked out of court a free man, but the That's only just beginning. Marcus Reed didn't just walk out of a courtroom that day, he walked out having changed it. What started as a courtroom drama became a social revelation, a legal awakening, a human triumph. And while the cameras flashed, the headlines exploded, and the video clips went viral, Marcus wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't proving he was smarter than the lawyers in the room. He wasn't showing off that he was surviving. And more than that, he was sending a message. When the world saw a hoodie, he showed them intelligence. When the court saw a suspect, he revealed a student of the law. When the system saw a number, he stood up as a name, a voice, a life that mattered. But this story isn't just about Marcus. This is about all the people who never had that chance. The ones who didn't grow up memorizing case law. The ones who couldn't articulate their truth in the perfect order of legal procedure. The ones who sat quietly, hoping someone, anyone, would see the cracks in their case before it was too late. Marcus knew he had to speak. Not just for himself, but for them. After the case was dismissed, Marcus didn't disappear. He didn't run from what happened. He leaned into it. He said, "I used to think justice was automatic, that if you were innocent, the system would protect you. But now I know it only protects you if you know how to protect yourself. I was lucky. I had the tools. I had the fire. I had my mom. But what about the kids who don't?" That's why he didn't just win a case. He started a movement. Marcus is now pursuing law school, not just to wear a suit and sit behind a polished desk, but to stand up for people who are tired of being spoken over, written off, and pushed aside. He's made it his mission to teach others what he had to learn the hard way. How to recognize injustice, how to speak your truth, how to navigate systems designed to confuse and intimidate. And most importantly, how to never, ever let someone else write your story for you. So if you're watching this and you feel invisible, if you've ever been judged before you opened your mouth, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or unheard, let this story remind you. You have more power than you know, because your voice matters, and when you use it, clearly, calmly, courageously, the world listens. If this story inspired you, share it. Tell someone. Start a conversation. We're building a community that sees the unseen and amplifies what's been silenced. We're dropping new real-life stories, lessons on law, justice, and self-empowerment every week. These aren't just stories to watch. They're tools to carry with you. Subscribe to the channel, hit that bell so you never miss what matters, and become part of a growing group of people who believe justice should be for everyone, not just the few who know how to fight for it. Marcus walked into that courtroom alone. But if we listen, if we learn, and if we speak, he'll never be alone again. What did this story make you feel? What part hit home the hardest? Drop a comment below. We read everyone. Let's build something real together.